So they're, they're so focused, the medical community's been so focused on dropping LDL that they've gone to these drugs that are just decimating our LDL levels, which are, remember, essential for everything in our body. All our cell membranes in our body rely on it. And now you've got these trials that are showing, oh, maybe they do reduce cardiovascular disease. But if you look at the one trial in particular on PSK9 inhibitors, more people died in the wing that got the PSK9 inhibitor than didn't.
This week, I interviewed Dr. Ravi Kumar. Dr. Kumar is a board-certified neurosurgeon and assistant professor at UNC Chapel Hill, who also hosts the Dr. Kumar Discovery podcast. His personal motto is to question everything. We discussed Ravi's health journey with statins, along with how to live a metabolically healthy life, the problem with seed oils, the importance of vitamin D, and his one tip to get your body back to what it once was. Really enjoyed my interview with Ravi. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name's Brian Gryn, and I have Dr. Ravi Kumar on. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian.
Thanks for coming on, Ravi. I appreciate it. Coming from North Carolina.
Yep.
And board-certified neurosurgeon. Also a professor at UNC Chapel Hill. And what made you go down this route? What got you into sort of this practice and sort of this like health and wellness sort of adventure that you've been on?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me first, Brian.
Yeah.
And, I went to medical school and then I did my residency in neurosurgery, and that was a lot of training, and at the end of it, I'm married, I have 4 kids. With all that training, I still felt like I didn't know how to optimally take care of my health and my family's health. I mean, that's crazy, right? Because, I had gone through literally 11 years of training after undergrad, and I still felt not adequately prepared. So, what do? You go to your doctor. Even as a doctor, you go to your doctor. And my doctors didn't have the answers that I needed to the questions I was asking about how to optimize our health. So I was like, I got to do this myself. I have to go beyond my training and find the answers to these questions. So I just started doing deep dives on so many topics to educate myself and help me take care of my family and also my own health. And that led to all these answers and all these things that we never learned in medical school. In fact, we never even scratched the surface of this. And also, I discovered a lot of things that were just flat out wrong that I learned in my medical training, either wrong or misconstrued, and that oftentimes is the case. And so, as I was doing this for years, I finally, thought, well, hey, why don't I do this for everyone else too? Put this out there in an easy to understand, like clear, unbiased, non-dogmatic format that people can hopefully benefit from the same investigations that I'm doing. I call them discoveries. That's why my podcast is called the Dr. Kumar Discovery, and just put it out there and let people have the information because, I felt like, this knowledge had really empowered me, and why not give it to everyone else? Let them do the same.
Yeah. I feel like Western medicine is really good with like acute care, but when it comes to like preventative, it's missing the boat there, huh?
Yeah, big time. I mean, that's allopathic medicine. It's the treatment of disease, So we treat disease. We wait for the disease to happen and then we treat it. That's what I do in my practice as a neurosurgeon. I treat people once they have a brain tumor or once they have spinal cord compression or a nerve compression. I don't help them prevent it. And that's just outside the wheelhouse of my trained profession. So that's why I kind of come outside the box for my own health and wellness. And I do give this information to my patients. Many of them are not interested in that. They're like, hey, no, I don't want to stop smoking, or I don't want to improve my metabolic health, or I don't want to do this or that. And that's fine. And because, not everyone wants that. But I find with my podcast, I can reach a lot more. I can reach millions, right? And sure. Those are the millions or the people who actually are interested in taking this information and doing something with it. And so that's why I do that on the side.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I've been interviewing people for the last, gosh, over 5 years now, and I run into this quite a bit where you have, like a health professional who realized that what they learned in training isn't something that is, well, I think it's not something that's like preventative or like that can help
Right.
people maybe not get to the point where they have to get surgery.
Yeah.
And so it's up to the individual to sort of go out there and find it out themselves. And whether it's through a
Yeah.
podcast, or maybe just a naturopathic
Mhm.
physician or someone like yourself or myself, what are some of the biggest things that you've learned on your own health journey or your family's health journey that you try to apply for, yourself and then potential, patients? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I've been all over the place. From for me, cardiovascular health. I have high cholesterol naturally. My whole family does, honestly. So it's a familial trait, and there's no one in our family that's ever had a heart attack. But I'll
Right.
tell you, the first thing, when actually, it was during my medical school, I went to see my primary care doctor, and he's like, God, you got to go on a statin. If you don't, you're probably going to have a heart attack early in life.
Mm.
And we had just done our cardiovascular section in pathology and physiology. And so I was like, and they talked about how important statins were for preventing cardiovascular disease and all this. So I was like, okay, well, my doctor's telling me I just learned about it in medical school. I should probably go on a statin.
Mm.
I went on a statin, and Brian, I've never felt worse in my life. I mean, they talk about muscle aches, when you
Mm.
take statins, but I mean, there's something deeper. And for some people, at least for me, there was. I mean, we're talking about brain fog, depression,
Mm.
just like feeling like the inside of your body is just falling apart. Not just musculoskeletal, but like the whole, like the workings of your body are falling apart. And I couldn't figure out what was going on, you
Mm.
know? And so, my wife and my wife was like, "Hey, Ravi, you just started that new medication. That's probably it." I said, "No, I just learned about this in medical school. This is essential for preventing cardiovascular disease. There's no way that it would destroy someone like what's happening to me right now. So that's not it." And so I carried on taking the statin for, days, actually almost a week. And finally, my wife's like, "Just listen, stop the statin and see what happens. If you don't get better, you can go back on it." So I stopped it, and within a couple days, I was back to normal. It was
Yeah.
crazy. And I actually tried a statin again a few years later when I was in my residency, because my doctor again saw my cholesterol levels and was like, "Hey, Ravi, you need to probably go on a statin." And so I was like, I didn't do well with the statin, and I tried it. I had tried simvastatin the first time. He says, "Well, just try it again." So we tried
Hmm.
a torvastatin, and the exact same thing happened.
Mm.
I just fell apart. And I stopped it and got better. So that was my experience with statins, but that also sparked a huge question in me. Listen, I have high cholesterol, but no one in my family's ever had a heart attack. Do I need to lower my cholesterol with a statin? Is that need to happen? I mean, because it makes me feel like I'm going to die. And so I went down this whole rabbit hole of investigating this, and it turns out, one, that statins are incredibly deleterious to the body. I mean, 10% of people who take them get myopathy. The brain makes all its own cholesterol. It doesn't get it from dietary sources or from the cholesterol made in your liver. The brain makes all its own, and if it can't make it, it falls apart. And 25% of all your cholesterol in your body is in the brain. So you
Mm.
can imagine, you take a statin that crosses the blood-brain barrier, like simvastatin and the torvastatin. They go in and they prevent your brain from making the essential nutrient or the essential building block of its structure.
Mm.
And you can imagine, I felt brain fog and told like I couldn't put two ends together, when I was on a statin. Well, that's because I was preventing my brain from maintaining its structure. So that you get myopathy, cardiomyopathy, dementia, diabetes, liver injury. I mean, the list goes on and on. Okay. And so these are just the risks of statins, and all drugs have risks. So that's fine, right? Well, what are the benefits? If the benefits are spectacular, then maybe it outweighs the risks. Well, the benefits of statins in anyone who hasn't had a cardiovascular disease event don't exist. I mean, it's all out there in the data. I mean, they've done large meta-analysis of many trials, and they don't, if you haven't had a cardiovascular event, there is no survival benefit from taking a statin, period. It's the raw data. You don't hear that though. When you go to your doctor, you hear, hey, if you take the statin, it'll reduce your risk by 40 of a cardiovascular event by 44%. That's for Crestor. They'll say that. And you're like, whoa, 44%? That's incredible. I mean, that's what my doctor told me. And so I was like, where do they get that number from? So if you look at that trial, it's in people who are at high risk they've had a heart attack, they're at high risk, they have inflammation because their CRP is elevated, and they're just doing poorly from a cardiovascular standpoint because of other life choices that we can talk about later. And so when they put them on Crestor, which is rosuvastatin, their risk of a cardiovascular event falls by 44% over 2 years. But that's a relative risk reduction, and no one tells you that. And so 44% sounds amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at what does that mean? Well, that means that if someone's risk is 1.2% per year of a cardiovascular event, then that risk falls by 44%. So it ends up that your actual risk reduction in that study was about 0.6% per year reduction.
Right.
But you hear 44%. And you hear nothing about the risks,
Yeah, I've had this. I mean, my dad, I remember, got on one briefly, and he experienced the same thing, and then he got off it. I mean, he mainly like muscle aches was a big one for him.
I mean, that's a big one. And see, this is the thing. They if you look at the statin clinical trials, they don't say much about muscle aches. They say, it's 1 or 2% or 2 or 3%, something very low, right? Or even fractions of a percent. But what they do is these clinical trials for statins, they take patients and they do this run-in period where they put a bunch of patients on statins and they see if anyone doesn't do well with them. If they don't do well with it, they take them out of the trial before it even starts.
Interesting.
So they self-select the best candidates for this drug before they even start, and that it's called a washout period, and or a run-in period, and it totally skews the results because these companies want a positive result for their trial, right? If they don't, they've wasted tons of money in R&D and running these clinical trials, which costs billions sometimes, and or hundreds of millions. And so they're incentivized to have a positive result, even if it's not truly a positive result.
I was just looking up as we were talking the market share of the statin market in 2024 is 16.85 billion. And it's expected to reach over 24 billion by 2032.
Yeah. So, you've got statins, right? That's been, a guy in the 70s and 80s named Akiro Endo, a Japanese researcher, found the benefits of statins or the biological effects of statins because they're fungal toxins, and fungus would essentially poison anything that was trying to eat its resources with statins. Statins, what they do is they prevent cholesterol synthesis in the body. And cholesterol, we always think about cholesterol is bad. Cholesterol is vital. You can't survive without cholesterol. It is an integral part of every cell membrane in your whole body. It helps you form hormones. It's the precursor to vitamin D. Cholesterol is essential to life. And fungus knew that, so they created these toxins that inhibited our ability to make cholesterol. So the statin was developed then, and there was this whole idea that high cholesterol causes cardiovascular disease. So if we lower it, you won't have cardiovascular disease. And they haven't really slowed down, obviously, cardiovascular disease or mortality over the years, but they've moved on from statins now into these PSK9 inhibitors. Have you heard of those?
A little bit.
Yeah. So PSK9 is this protein in your cells that essentially binds to LDL receptors So LDL receptors are these grappling hooks that sit on the surface of the cell, and they grab LDL molecules, they pull them in to the cells, so they remove them from circulation. Okay.
Mm.
So the more LDL receptors you have sitting on your cell surface, the less LDL you have in your circulation, because there's more getting pulled into the cell. And this PSK9 is this protein that grabs onto an LDL receptor, tags it for destruction. Okay. So the more PSK9 you have inside your cells, especially in the liver, the more of these LDL receptors get internalized and destroyed, and the more LDL you end up having circulating in your body, right? Because you're not pulling the LDL back in because there's less receptors on the cell surface.
Mm.
And PSK9 inhibitors is an antibody that you have to inject usually twice a month, and it goes in and it binds this PSK9 protein, and it prevents it from tagging these LDL receptors for destruction. So what you end up having is way more LDL receptors on your cell surface, and it drops your cholesterol so low. These people on PSK9 inhibitors are dropping their LDL to 30.
Mm.
Literally. I mean, the AHA recommends getting your LDL below 100, or if you're at high risk, below 70, which I think is even too low.
Yeah.
But PSK9 inhibitors drop to 30, and there's no biological like circumstance where a human being would live at an LDL of 30. It's just completely abnormal, right? So they're so focused, the medical community's been so focused on dropping LDL that they've gone to these drugs that are just decimating our LDL levels, which are, remember, essential for everything in our body. All our cell membranes in our body rely on it. And now you've got these trials that are showing, oh, maybe they do reduce cardiovascular disease. But if you look at the one trial in particular on PSK9 inhibitors, more people died in the wing that got the PSK9 inhibitor than didn't.
Mm.
But when they grouped to, hey, cardiovascular events, yeah, like angina, cardiovascular revascularization, or MIs, they said there was a slight increase in people who were not getting PSK9 inhibitor. And so they called it a win, and they said now everyone should be taking this if they're high risk, But they didn't say that, hey, listen, in the group that got the PSK9 inhibitor, more people were dying. And so it's this game that they're playing with statistics around cardiovascular disease. And if you don't do this deep dive, you don't go into that paper and you find it.
Right,
No one tells you about it.
Most people aren't doing that.
Yeah, I wasn't doing it as a doctor until I went, and I'm like, I had to go digging, And so that's the kind of situation we face when trying to interpret these, answer these questions about cardiovascular disease and every other health topic. Is like, what is actually in the data? Because you're only telling us what you want us to know.
Right.
And if it's motivated by product sales, we're talking billions, like what you're talking about. PSK9 inhibitors are making billions as well. Then they're only going to tell us what
they want us to hear.
Yeah, is motivating a potential stock price increase and all this stuff, And that's fine that money motivates medicine, but still, we got to be careful. We got to walk carefully through this landscape.
And so, obviously, you mentioned you went on a statin, got off. What were sort of some of the lifestyle changes that you decided to make, or if any? I mean, people live with high cholesterol all the time. So what type of sort of lifestyle changes did you make? Yeah.
So, obviously, so I think it's the root of what's at the root of all disease, including cardiovascular disease. But, you look at, osteoarthritis, dementia, diabetes, it's all inflammation. Inflammation is at the overzealous inflammation in your body. So what I do for my family is we focus on living essentially a metabolically healthy life with lower systemic inflammation.
Sure.
And this is how we do that. So first of all, I would say that inflammation is not bad. Inflammation is necessary for life. You're constantly creating micro injuries throughout your body just from living, and you have to heal that with inflammation. That's how we heal, is through inflammation. But it has to be in some kind of homeostasis where it's not too much and it's not too little. It's right at the right level, and it churns off when it's supposed to churn off. And we, in modern society, many, I would say most people, at least I see in my practice, are just, their inflammation is just wrecking their body. They have, runaway inflammation. And the things that cause inflammation, the general things that I think cause inflammation, are metabolic syndrome, number one. And this is, where you have inappropriate use of energy in your body because of something called insulin resistance. So, let's say you start eating very high refined carbohydrate diet, right? Now you've got those carbohydrates are metabolized into glucose. You have more glucose than you need. Okay. Because your muscles use glucose, your brain uses glucose, your body uses glucose as its main energy source to make ATP. But when you got too much of it, your body's like, hey, too much. Put it away for a little bit and we'll use it later. So it puts the glucose away first in glycogen. And then when the glycogen warehouses are full, then it starts putting it into fat. And so what fat does is fat is not inert. It starts releasing hormones and bioactive molecules that make the rest of our cells say, oh, let's not pull in so much glucose because we're in an energy storage phase right now. The fat's telling you. And so the fat makes you, essentially releases molecules that make you insulin resistant. Okay. And that leads into a vicious cycle of, your hormone, your testosterone gets aromatized to estrogen, your muscles become less responsive to insulin, and it leads to higher glucose levels. And glucose does something when it's sitting in the bloodstream, it attaches to proteins. It's called glycation. And that's why you'll often hear this term advanced glycation end products. So that is a marker that glucose is attaching to proteins and wrecking them.
Hey everyone, quick interruption here. If you are looking to gain energy, lose inches around your waist, and build strength, well, look no further than my book, The Stepladder System, 6 Steps to Lifelong Health and Vitality. What you get with the book is my full step-by-step plan and blueprint that I've worked with all my clients with, packed into one book. With part 1, you're going to lay the foundation, tackle any common challenges that might come in your way. Part 2 is my 6-pillar blueprint, how to set yourself up with a solid plan and know exactly what to do when life throws any curveballs. And lastly, step 3 are learning to implementation, a plan for getting results over the next weeks and beyond. So there you have it. I'll leave a link in the show notes for my Stepladder System book. Now back to the podcast.
And when your immune system sees this glucose attached to proteins, it wants to get rid of it, destroy it. So it starts an inflammatory response and starts destroying those things that are glycated. And that leads to systemic inflammation. The one marker that sometimes your doctor will check is called hemoglobin A1C. That's a marker of glycated hemoglobin. And the higher that is the higher it tells you how high your glucose has been over the last 90 days, essentially. And so that's one thing that causes inflammation. The others are like smoking, uncontrolled hypertension, where you're constantly causing endovascular injury and constantly having to heal it. And then another is eating diet high inflammatory oils, fats, because those lead to they're highly susceptible to oxidation, and they also push through metabolic pathways that we have, push inflammation rather than shut it down. And the other one that I think is very important is the paucity of omega-3 fatty acids in our diet, which are a off switch for inflammation in our body, and we just don't get enough of them anymore.
Yeah, you mentioned seed oils. Seed oils are something that's become rampant. I know there's some people that have sort of a mixed feeling on them. I always say, like, does it pass like the eye test? Like, if you watch how they make seed oils, you're just like, wow, is that something that we should be consuming?
Yeah.
It's been something that is cheap to make and easy to use in foods, and you don't even know what's in there. So it's sort of got the neutral taste profile. But if you go out to eat, they're cooking in these seed oils, and we used to back in the day, Like McDonald's actually even used to cook with like beef tallow
Yeah.
and things like that, right?
Hmm. Yep.
But that changed after, gosh, probably once like industrial revolution started,
Hmm.
and it's become rampant. Is that something that you try to take out of your diet?
Yeah, I mean, we don't. So, like seed oil, just so everyone knows, is oil from a seed that normally wouldn't be oily. In
Right.
most cases, sometimes there's seeds like sunflowers that have a lot of oil in them. That's also a seed oil, but it's seed from an oil that or oil from a seed that you wouldn't expect to be oily. So corn, soybeans,
Hmm.
cottonseed, these things that are like, what, there's oil in there and enough to fill a whole bottle. And there is, because of the sheer amount of it that we produce of these seeds. So like say corn, let's take corn or soybeans, for example. We make a massive amount of corn and soybeans for animal feed, corn, seed meals, all these things that, and carbohydrate, rich staples that we put out there. And when you can't leave the oil in them, there's a tiny amount of oil in the embryo of the seed, a tiny amount.
Hmm.
The embryo is called the germ in a seed. And this oil, if you leave it in there, will make the flour go rancid once you grind it. So they take this process where they take a petroleum distillate called hexane. So gasoline is octane, mostly octane. It's like there's different levels of octane in it. That's why you can pay more at the pump for certain amounts, right?
Right.
But octane is volatile. It's fast burning. And it's gives you that sweet smell that you smell from gasoline. That smells very toxic. Well, another smell in there is hexane, because
Mhm.
hexane is another hydrocarbon in gasoline and petroleum that evaporates at room temperature, and you can smell it. So the reason they use hexane to get these oils out is because these hydrocarbons like octane and hexane, they are fat soluble. So if you grind up a bunch of soybeans and you got this big meal of soybeans, and then you mix it with hexane, all the oil will dissolve into the hexane. Okay. So now what you do is you wash the liquid component off, which is the hexane with the oil in it. You wash it off into another compartment, and then you let that soybean meal let the hexane evaporate out, because it will evaporate out at low pressure and even room temperature. And so now you've got this soybean meal or corn meal that they're going to put in a bag and sell on the grocery store shelf to you, that's been washed in hexane.
Yeah.
So they sell that. And then the next thing they have is the other component with the hexane, and they evaporate that off, recollect it, they recondense it and collect it somewhere else. And what's left that didn't evaporate, that was dissolved in that hexane, is the oil. And that's a seed oil. So that's how majority of your seed oils, even sunflower oil, are obtained, is through this hexane distillation. And hexane is a known neurotoxin. There's no doubt about it. I mean, if I, these food chemists and all these guys who decide to develop these processes, if I took hexane and poured it in their oatmeal and I said, okay, let it evaporate and then eat it or give
Right.
it to your kid, they would say, hell no. But they design these industrial processes to create, extract these seed oils and then say, go ahead and sell it to the public, and that's where seed oils come from. And the vast majority of them are distilled by hexane wash. So, and to be fair, majority of the hexane is as out of the food when they sell it to you. It's
Sure.
not like they're leaving a bunch of hexane in there. There's trace amount is what they say. So trace amount of hexane left, and is likely not overtly toxic to you, but no one wants that in their body.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing about seed oils is that we have never ate this much in the history of human evolution, never had access to this much seed oil. We might have eaten grains that had a small amount of seed oil in them, but you would get minuscule amounts in a whole food diet, minuscule. But now all of a sudden we have access to jugs of it,
Yeah.
literally jugs of it, that we can just bathe our food and fry it in, or mix it into our brownie mixes or whatever. I mean, it's a massive amount. And what's in this seed oil is something called linoleic acid, which is a omega-6 fatty acid. So to give some context here, omega-6 fatty acids are essential fatty acids. We've got two essential fatty acids, omega-6 and omega-3, okay? And these are essential, meaning our body can't make them. We have to obtain them from our diet. And what they do is omega-6 is a inflammation promoter necessary for healing. We need omega-6 to heal our body, to turn on inflammation, heal our body. And then we need omega-3 to turn that inflammation down when the healing is done. And if we have we don't have enough omega-6 and we have too much omega-3, we can't turn on inflammation. If we have too much omega-6 and not enough omega-3, we can't turn inflammation off. Mm-hmm. And so that's what happens here is you get this where you're putting a half a cup of, vegetable oil into your brownie mix and giving it to your kids. And now your kids are systemically inflamed because they're not getting any fish oil. I mean, they might be getting a little bit, but they're not getting a quarter cup of it, and most likely they're not getting much because our diet's so devoid in omega-3 fatty acids. And they're getting a ton of omega-6 fatty acid through seed oil, through this industrial process that it provides them for us. And they end up being systemically inflamed. That leads to metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease later in life, degenerative arthritis, neurodegenerative diseases, maybe even neurodevelopmental diseases like autism and ADHD. I mean, so it sets the stage for robust, uncontrolled inflammation in the human body.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could probably talk hours about it. I mean, canola oil is one that's probably most used, I think, in a lot of restaurants. Mm-hmm. Like you mentioned, heating these oils, they're unstable. And I was just looking into it a little bit, like when they're heated, they lead to formation of aldehydes and trans fats. Yeah. And so I always have a rule, like I don't eat fried foods like at all. Like that's like a no-go for me. And I don't miss them one bit.
So one thing you mentioned about heating these fats. So I think a real important point to point out here is that there's something is what the fats are called and why they're called it. So saturated fat is a string of carbons and hydrogens, and there's no double bonds in it. So a saturated fat is a single strand of carbons with no double bonds, and double bonds are very susceptible to oxidation. And that oxidation is what creates the aldehydes and can cause the trans conformation of the fatty acid and all this stuff. And so when you eat saturated fat, like, something high in saturated fat, like butter, lard, tallow, whatever it is, coconut oil, you're filling your body with a fat that doesn't oxidize, essentially. Doesn't oxidize. So an oxidation stimulates inflammation for sure. It is a very potent inflammation stimulator because it damages your tissues, damages your cell membranes, your mitochondria, everything. Omega-6 fatty acids are highly polyunsaturated. That's why when you buy a bottle of vegetable oil, they call it polyunsaturated oil, because that means they have multiple double bonds throughout the carbon chain. And that keeps the carbon chains from fitting together neatly, because the double bond creates a bend in the carbon chain. And so they're liquid at room temperature. And that's a good way to know what's polyunsaturated and what's saturated. If it's solid like coconut oil or tallow, it's probably saturated. If it's liquid like vegetable oil, it's probably polyunsaturated. And so these polyunsaturated fats are very prone to oxidation and damage in the body. And when you heat them, they oxidize very readily. Or if UV hits it, there's a bunch of different things that can cause it. It can even oxidize at body temperature. So when you fill your body with polyunsaturated fats like seed oils, those go into your LDL molecules, because your LDL molecules are just these transporters through your blood for lipids and cholesterol. And if they're full of seed oils, they're going to oxidize. There's oxygen in your blood. There's oxygen in your tissue. The LDL usually goes to areas of damage where there's high oxidative stress because, all the metabolic activity to fix that damage. And so if you send a truckload of oxidizable fats into a damaged area, what do you think is going to happen? Cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis.
Right.
Now, if your LDL molecules are full of saturated fat, which doesn't oxidize, the LDL moves into that area of damage, does its repair work, donates its molecules, and moves on. And cardiovascular disease is not initiated because you have to have an oxidation event. So you got two situations you could possibly be in. One, the LDL is full of seed oil, which is omega-6 fatty acid, which is highly oxidizable.
Right.
Or it's full of saturated fat because you're eating tallow and butter and things like that.
Now, just to interrupt, I was just going to say LDL is being blamed, and they really shouldn't be, right?
Yeah, exactly. LDL, you can't live without LDL. LDL is the transporter protein that bundles up cholesterol and lipids and transports it throughout your body for cell repair, lipid membrane repair, hormone synthesis, all these important functions that your cells can't live without. LDL is the delivery truck. And so what do you put in your delivery truck? Are you going to put omega-6 fatty acids, which are pro-inflammatory, highly oxidizable, to move into an area of damage that's already there's a high oxidative stress because of the metabolic repair that's going on there?
Right.
Well, if you do that, those omega-6s are just going to oxidize, and the LDL is going to get stuck there. It's going to form a foam cell and initiate atherosclerosis. But if your LDLs are full of saturated fat, which we have villainized for the last 60 years, that LDL is going to move into the area of damage. It's going to donate the essential components that the cells need for repair, and then it's going to move on. And atherosclerosis is not going to initiate. That is just the science is very clear on this. You have to have an oxidation event of the LDL molecule for atherosclerosis to initiate. If you don't get that, you can't form an atherosclerotic plaque. So there's a really cool vignette here. There's a group of Pacific Islanders called in the South Pacific called the Tokelauans, and their 70% of their calories come from saturated fat from coconut. Okay, so you can imagine the AHA recommends that we take less than 10% of our diet or less with saturated fat. The Tokelauans are eating 70% of their calories from saturated fat, and they smoke like chimneys. Literally, they trade coconut. They grow coconut, they dry it, and it's called copra when they do it, and they trade it to these boats for cigarettes, not for money. and they have no incidence of cardiovascular disease at all, even though they're under tons of oxidative stress from their smoking. But what's happening here is their LDLs are not full of oxidizable fats. They're full of saturated fat from coconut oil, from eating coconut, that doesn't oxidize. So they don't develop cardiovascular disease. As soon as these Tokelauans move to New Zealand and adopt a Western diet and lifestyle with full seed oils, they start developing cardiovascular disease and metabolic syndrome and diabetes and all these things that are just unheard of when they're living in the islands where they eat mostly coconut. I thought that was a cool vignette that illustrates that topic.
And this is the Tokelauans. Is that the
Tokelauans? Yeah. They've also demonstrated this in India with the railway workers. They noticed that the North Indians smoked a ton and ate mostly saturated fat from ghee and animal products. And the South Indians were eating mostly seed oils like peanut oil and sesame oil, and didn't smoke much at all. The South Indians hardly smoked. And the North Indians, a cardiovascular disease during the study period was like a curiosity. They had never even heard of it. This was back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. And the South Indians were having an epidemic of cardiovascular disease and heart attacks. So one group was eating tons of saturated fat, smoking like chimneys, and eating tons of sugar also, by the way.
Yeah, right.
And the other, and having no heart attacks or cardiovascular events. And the other group was eating mostly polyunsaturated fats from seed oils, not smoking, and had very little sugar intake. And they had just rampant cardiovascular disease and heart attacks. And so,
It's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, very interesting.
So for the typical individual, and it's just about sort of making that I don't know, transition out of these seed oils that are rampant. Which part of the big thing is like not eating out as much would be, I think, a good first step. I know it's nice every once in a while, and sometimes you can't avoid it, and I think that's fine. But if you do eat out, you could, what I do sometimes is I'll ask, like if I get eggs, I'll
Mhm.
just ask them to cook them in butter,
Yeah.
things like that. Those are the steps that you've been taking?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell everyone the first step is find that clear bottle of vegetable oil in your pantry,
Yeah,
which I would say a majority of the households in the US have that in there.
right.
Pour it in your compost pile, you
Or
know?
you pour it in your gasoline thing. No, okay.
Yeah, yeah, make some biodiesel out of it, you know? So, no, yeah, I would say just pour it out, get rid of it, and don't
Right.
ever buy it again. Definitely don't feed it to your kids. And you can replace that with coconut oil, butter. You got to be careful with avocado oils, but they can be decent. The Chosen brand has been shown to not be very oxidized. Olive oil is okay too. Olive oil and avocado oil are monounsaturated, meaning they only have one double bond. So they're not very susceptible to oxidation. And if you buy good quality oils, they should be pretty good for you. And healthy populations around the world use olive oil. So
Yeah,
so
that was going to be my next thought
yeah.
question, was like your thoughts on olive oil and avocado oil.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is my thoughts on that, and then we'll get back to the what
Yeah.
the steps
Yeah.
to do to. Okay, so olive oil and avocado oil are monounsaturated, so they have one double bond. So they still have a little bit of susceptibility to oxidation, but nowhere compared to the polyunsaturated fats. Okay, so and it's because of the way the fat forms, too, the shape of the fat. So olive oil.
And they also have lower linoleic acid as well,
Yeah,
right?
yes. Yeah. So like, olive oil and avocado oil have about 10% of the fat is linoleic acid, and about 70% is monounsaturated fatty acid in the form of oleic acid.
Hmm.
Um, so they olive oil has a lot of polyphenols and antioxidants in it from the fruit. Okay, that kind of help it resist oxidation and also have anti-inflammatory effects in your body. Okay. Um, Avocado oil has that too, but to much lesser extent. And the quality of avocado oils varies widely.
Yeah.
So and when you eat avocado oil just doesn't taste great. It has a more of a bland flavor, and whereas olive oil, you take a spoonful of olive oil and you're like, yeah, that's buttery, that's spicy, that's delicious. So your body's kind of telling you, hey, this is good, this is not great. So avocado oil is fine. We have it in our house, and the Chosen brand, you can find it like Costco and Target. That's pretty safe and low oxidation.
Chosen bread. Yeah, because I
Yeah,
know that some of these olive oils and avocado oils, are diluted with cheap
yeah,
vegetable oils. So
yeah.
yep,
And you have to
yeah,
be very careful of that. And,
yeah,
for olive oils, I say get a single origin olive oil in a dark bottle with a
right,
very nice flavor. If you don't taste it and it's not grassy and spicy and delicious, it's probably not good olive oil, you
right.
know? So yeah, so I would say use your taste buds to tell you a little bit, but you can also do some research, and there's studies out there that show which um, olive oils are pure and which are not. I'm a fan of olive oil. I love olive oil. It's tasty. We eat a lot of butter and tallow in our house. So um,
Yeah,
and we use coconut oil too. So coconut oil is great it's solid at room temperature, but if you liquefy it, you can use through heat. You can use it for most of your cooking needs, and it's highly it's mostly saturated fat, like more than even like tallow and butter. So
right.
and it has like antifungal properties in your gut, and it has all sorts of nice. There's a lot of nice things about coconut oil. So I'm a big fan of coconut oil. Oh,
Do you know who Brad Marshall is?
mm-mm,
Okay. Maybe
yeah,
I'll introduce you to Brad. Yeah,
yeah,
I've had him on the podcast a long time ago, but
okay.
he talks about all this. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, coconut oil is cool. I mean, it's got but I mean, I think that you should look at ancestral patterns. What did your ancestors, if you look at your great great grandparents, and what were they eating? And they weren't eating seed oils, and they were likely eating, depending on your ancestry. Mine were eating tons of ghee and coconut oil. Yours were probably eating tons of butter, tallow, and lard, probably. And and they were doing fine. The cardiovascular epidemic didn't start until like the 30s and 40s.
Right.
And before that, it was like people were getting TB and stuff. That was their main concern. It wasn't dying from heart attacks. So if you look at ancestral traditions and even further back, you can kind of define what was keeping our people healthy and vital. And if we're doing something different, then it's something to look at critically, I think. So back to your question about what to do, I say first get rid of the vegetable oil in your house. Just don't have it in there. Use monounsaturated and saturated fats mainly. And when you go out, this is a trap that we have to be careful about, Brian, is becoming monks, and so dogmatic about our food choices that we get rid of the happiness in our life, because that can happen. All of a sudden you're not going to have a piece of that birthday cake, or you're not going to share a little plate of fries with your friends, or you're not going to have drink a beer every once in a while, whatever it is. I mean, things that that are not great for you, but they're food and drink we create social connections over.
Right.
And all of a sudden, when you're the one person who can't eat this, you can't eat that, you can't and it's fine. You feel like you're doing the right thing, but in the end, you're like sapping some of your happiness and reducing your ability to connect socially. And I think that's a real thing to look at. So I tell people, listen, when you're out, don't be a monk. You can't avoid seed oils when you're eating out at restaurants. It's just impossible.
Right.
There's unless it's a restaurant that says they don't use seed oils, which those are like one in a million.
Yeah.
So I would say don't glorify gluttony. Don't just go hog wild and I'm not going to care about it just one night. I'm not going to, but don't be like completely pious and unable to enjoy food. So, moderate and don't do it often,
Right.
and that I think is a good middle ground, because seed oils are just unavoidable, unfortunately. And you have to have social connection, and you have to enjoy your life. What I say is, listen, if you're going to have a seed oil input, like a, omega-6 input, take, double up on your omega-3 fatty acid supplement that day, because omega-3 is the yin to omega-6's yang. And so if you are going to have an increased amount of omega-6 that day, increase your omega-3 fatty acid intake, and that'll bring that inflammation in balance, hopefully, and
Yep.
and one meal is not going to kill you either. You got to remember that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, social isolation will kill you.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure. Yeah. I mean, orthorexia is a disease where it's a defined disease where you're so obsessed with your food choices that you can't enjoy food anymore. And that happens all the time. I mean, like some of the big like health influencers out there are orthorexic, or they have some supplemental mania, where they just they think they have to take 100 capsules a day to stay healthy, whereas the human body didn't evolve to take any capsules.
No, I know. I mean, I go back and forth on supplements. I mean, I've actually feel like since I've done the podcast, I've probably scaled back, even though like, I do have these companies that like send, which are, I'm sure, a lot of great supplements out there, but I think you can, you go a little bit crazy with all that.
Yeah.
I try to
for sure.
pick and choose the ones that I decide to take.
I'm not anti-supplement, by the way.
Yeah.
But I do think that, if you can get it from food, get it from food.
Right. I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Because there's some great, like, buddy of mine, Brad Kearns, has a great whey protein out there, and he's out in California, and I use it from time to time, but a lot of times I'll just eat after I work out. Like, it's like simple.
Yeah.
Usually you can get 90% of the things you need from the foods, hopefully, obviously, with certain foods, like the way our soils been depleted over the years. There could be
Yeah.
some debate about that. Are we getting
Mm.
exactly what we want from those foods? But that's a whole
Yeah.
nother.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother.
No, micronutrient deficiency and supplementation is something I definitely focus on, because I'm in that camp with you. Is that I think that what we could get before ancestrally is just not readily available to us anymore, unless we work really hard to get these foods. But that can be difficult and stressful too. Whereas just taking 15 milligrams of zinc glycinate a day, you're fine.
Yeah. And then one more thing we'll talk is like vitamin D. Now we're getting into it's still beautiful here in Chicago, but we're getting into the winter months. And I think people that live in the Midwest, a lot of them do lack that. They
Yeah.
become deficient in vitamin D. Thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I would say that vitamin D is used by every cell in your body,
Yeah.
every single cell in your body. It's a master regulator for your whole metabolism, your biochemistry, everything. It is, um, and it is 50% of the world, Brian, is vitamin D deficiency. In the US, it's more around 25%. But if you look at the world as a whole, it's around 50%. And in UK, it's above 50%. So it is an epidemic
Hmm.
of and when you're vitamin D deficiency, your life is wrecked. You're not ticking. Your body's not ticking at all. You're flat affect. You're immunosuppressed. Your bone and muscle strength decreases. I mean, it is just it'll drop you, and you won't even know it. You
Hmm.
just people just see you and be like, oh, they're so flat. What's going on with them? They're depressed, and they are depressed, but it's all reversible because it's vitamin D deficiency. And it's
Yeah.
very easy to happen. I used to live in Hawaii, and I was vitamin D deficient in
Hmm.
Hawaii, and it was because of inflammation. My liver wasn't converting the one form of vitamin D into the more active form. So, um, but that being said, everyone should know their vitamin D status. Everyone should know. And what the doctors generally say is, you should keep it above 30 nanograms per milliliter of 25 hydroxy vitamin D. That's what they'll measure, 25 hydroxy vitamin D. And I looked at the ancestral studies across, all these population, hunter gatherers, and people who are living outside of the modern world, and they don't take supplements. They get it from food. They're living like vitally, and they're generally around 45 nanograms per milliliter. So that's what I shoot for, and me and for myself and for my children and my wife. So 30 I think is fine, but you're right on the border of low. Who wants to be there?
Right. Right.
And the upper limit normal is 100, but that there's no recorded toxicity at that level either. So I would say shoot for higher, and it's really, really, really hard to overdose on vitamin D. I mean, you can do it, but you got to take like hundreds of thousands of IU per day, for a long period of time. So what I do, and it works for me, and everyone's biology is a little different. So you definitely should titrate this to your vitamin D level. But I take about 2,000 IU per day with vitamin K2, which is essential, and the MK7 variant. I take 2,000 IU a day in the summer, and in the winter I take 5,000 IU per day.
Hmm.
And I try to get sunshine whenever I can.
Yeah. Getting out is a big part, but yeah, like in the winter, supplementation could really be of
Yeah.
benefit. And with the vitamin D with K2, is
Mhm.
that right? Yeah.
So I take about 250 micrograms of vitamin K2 MK7 variant per day. So what that does is that vitamin K stimulates or activates these vitamin K dependent proteins, and they essentially prevent calcium from crystallizing your soft tissues like your arteries, and push it into crystallization and protein scaffolds in your bones. So they harden your bones and soften your arteries essentially.
Hmm.
And these have been shown with clinical trials. In fact, there's even one that came out in 2025 that shows reduction in calcification of the arteries with vitamin K2 supplementation. And traditionally Japanese and traditional people have eaten either lots of leafy greens or lots of fermented foods, which provide K1 or K2, K1 can be converted into K2. So they kind of always had the right amount of K2 in their body.
Hmm.
And we hardly get any. I mean, it's like if you're not supplementing with K2 and you're not eating a bunch of fermented food, I mean, our modern life has pretty much like washed K2 out of our diet. So that's why I think this is one of them where you have to supplement with them, unless you're really good at fermenting your natto every day and eating it. So, which I did for a period of time, and I just couldn't keep up with it. So,
yeah, I don't have a ton of fermented foods. I every once in a while, but you're seeing more and more of them on the market, which is good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did a whole podcast on vitamin K2. If people want to check it out, it's on my website or on my podcast. But the main thing that I would leave people with is listen, for bone mineral density and for soft tissue, calcification prevention, you should take at least probably around 200 or more micrograms of vitamin K2, the MK7 variant, because you can buy the MK4 variant, which is the form we use in our body, but you can't absorb it through supplements form. So you have to take MK7 for absorption, then it gets converted to MK4 in your body.
Yeah. That makes sense. And where's the best place for people to find you, Ravi?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, drkumardiscovery.com. It's DRKUMAR discovery.com. I publish a bunch of articles on there, and also all my podcasts can be found there. Or you can just go to any major podcast platform and search the Dr. Kumar Discovery, and you'll find me. I'm also on all the social media platforms. So yeah, I post quite a bit, and people can feel free to reach out to me, send me emails, and I can suggest topics or ask me questions. As long as I can't give medical advice, but I can definitely like guide people.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we just touched the surface, but I think we hit on some good topics, seed oils, some vitamin D talk, and I think people will get a lot of value from that. So maybe we'll run it back again down the road.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right, Ravi. Well, I'll definitely put links in the show notes so people can find you. And I feel like they got plenty from today. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the show. I know there's thousands of podcasts out there, and you chose to listen to mine. I will put a link in the show notes if you want to connect with my guest. And if you are looking for one-on-one consulting with me, I will put a free 15-minute link so you can set up a call to see if you're fit for my 6-month health breakthrough program. So thanks again. Feel free to rate and subscribe. I would love that to help support the podcast. And till next time, have a great rest of the day, and I will see you on my next podcast. Thanks so much.